John, welcome aboard the Facts. Glad you can be here today, and with your years of experience in the state legislature, tell us a little bit about your background, your day job, and your position in the legislature today and the years past.
That's kind of a long list. Hi, Mike. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me. So, quick background. I'm a retired building contractor from the Brookings area. I have the blessing of being married for 44 years, and my wife and I also are blessed to live on a farm in rural Brookings County. We've got a couple kids that are grown, and again, we're blessed. They live close by, and we have 6 grandchildren. So when I hit my 60th birthday, or right about then, I thought I should serve. I should give something back. I was starting to step down a little bit from the business, and decided I should do some public service. And while I was thinking about that, one day I received a call from the chair of the Brookings County Republicans, who said, we're looking for somebody to run for District 4 legislature, and we think you'd be good. Would you do it? And so I think a number of people probably get in the legislature that way by being asked. And so that's what got me in. Initially, I served District 4, which was rural Brookings County, all of Dual County, Grant County, and then rural Coddington County. But then, and I served that district for 3 terms, 6 years. And then after the 2020 census, we have a mandated redistricting to make sure that the districts are approximately equal in population. And Brookings County got shifted and is now part of District 8. And so 2 years ago I ran for re-election in a new district, District 8, rural Brookings County, Kingsbury, Lake, and most of minor counties. So, but now, because I've served 4 terms, I'm what's called termed out. I don't know if you'd call that a lame duck or not, but I'm termed out and can't run again for the House.
Well, that's good. That's 4 consecutive back-to-back terms, and then the Constitution requires you either take a break or run for another House body, which would be the Senate. You are currently in the House.
Correct.
And in that House, on that district you mentioned, which does get moved on redistricting, there's 35 districts in the state of South Dakota, each divvied up by county and population, so that we've got 35 races we're going to be talking about here, and some primary races, which is essentially a campaign within an election for the party for the selection. There's more than one running for one position, or more than 2 running for 2 positions, and these primary races, which will be decided on June 4th, are going to decide who's going to be on the general election ballot. So it's internal campaigning within the parties. So that's what we're in the heat of the battle now, of these battles. And so we can maybe talk about some of these races. We're not going to get to all 35 races. There's not every district of the 35 in South Dakota has some primary competition. Correct. But can you go a little bit more about the district and what makes up a district as far as population or?
Okay. Well, like I said, after the 2020 census, we have, by our Constitution, we're limited to 35 districts, which is what we have. And so after that census, then they divide that number by 35 to basically come up with roughly 25,000 people that are required to be in each of those 35 districts. And so then that means the boundaries of those districts have to change in some way in order to make sure that each one is representing approximately the same population. So that's what happened. Each district has 1 senator and 2 representatives. And so that's kind of the makeup. And as you said, we're in the primary season right now, primary on June 4th. And in many cases, because the Republican Party is so dominant in South Dakota, the determination of who will serve in the Senate and the House is made at the primary. A number of these primaries that we'll talk about, there is no general election because no Democrats submitted petitions and are on the ball. In fact, that's what happened in my last election. I had a primary in District 8, but once I won that, there was no general election for District 8.
So there was no competing party in the Democrat side. If you beat the primary or you didn't have a primary, you were automatically in.
Correct, and we have some of those this year too.
Okay. So, and then we go back to my thought process of being a nerdy kid and taking Social Studies 101 or government. When they redistrict every 10 years as required by law, there's a gerrymandering or there's other things that are done to change districts and locations that might help certain parties or not. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, politics is involved in all of this.
Yeah.
And it was definitely involved back then. I don't know if we've ever had a more contentious redistricting than we had this last go-round. Normally it's fairly, the changes are relatively minor and there's not a lot of dissent or contention over it. This last go-round it was very contentious and the boundaries changed significantly in some cases, and in mine for sure, because the district that I'm now in is totally different. Without ever moving, I'm now in a very different geography than I represented before. So,
yeah.
That happened quite a bit.
Okay, well, very good. So a lot of new turf and new constituents you had to vie for that you didn't even know in previous.
Right.
Yeah. Well, very good. So we've got a few districts here to look through. If you could go through the list and help coach me, we'll go through some names. We've got, again, primary candidates in the Republican Party is what we're talking about today. How about State Senate District 3? We've got Carl Perry, Katie Washnuk, and this is the Aberdeen, Brown County area in upper South Dakota?
Correct. I think District 3 is basically just Aberdeen. It's large enough that it's got roughly 25,000 people. That's District 3. Carl Perry, I've been serving with for the past 6 years in the House. He's retired gentleman. I think he was in collections business or that kind of thing. One of the nicest, most genuine guys. I think everybody likes Carl Perry. It's kind of hard for me to imagine him doing collections. He probably didn't have to bend your arm very hard. You probably just wanted to give him the money.
That's a pretty good story. Yeah,
so,
a likable collector.
And one of the things that Carl has done that I'm really grateful for is there's a group called the weekly gathering during our legislative session called the Catacomb Caucus. It's Wednesday mornings at 7 a.m. It's just primarily for legislators and folks that work in the Capitol. And it's a non-denominational Christian time of song and fellowship and prayer. And Bob Glanzer was leading that when I got in the legislature. He was a legislator from Huron. Bob was maybe one of the first people in South Dakota to die from COVID.
Okay.
And so, but Carl, and this gets me back to Carl. Carl Perry stepped up after Bob Glanzer died. It took on the leadership of that Catacomb Caucus. So he organizes it and makes sure we have a speaker every week and that somebody's assigned to do music. And so he's just a great Christian guy. I think very tuned in with his constituents and like I say, very likable. And that's what I know about Carl Perry. And I should just say, as we talk through this list, I'm just going to share candidly what I know about these folks. There's some that I don't know much about. And in this particular race, his competition, Katie Washnuk, I see her name here, I don't know her. I think she's involved with economic development or something in Aberdeen, but unfortunately, that's the little I know.
Okay. Well, there's a list to continue to go through, and we're going to a few more of those names and lists in the primary after this. Welcome back to The Facts. We're here again with John Mills, State Representative from Brookings area, and we're talking about the South Dakota State, House, and Senate primary races. Let's continue through the list. We've kind of talked about the Brown County, Aberdeen area. Let's transition. We're going to move to District 4, Fred Deutsch and Stephanie Sauder. Where's the location in that area, and what do we know about those contestants?
Well, District 4, I can't remember I used to serve District 4, but the boundaries changed on it after redistricting. I do know it still is dual county, Grant County. I think it includes a little piece of Roberts County. It's Coddington County. I think it's also Hamlin County. I think that's basically it. So you kind of get that idea of where it is. This is going to be a race that everybody's watching. Representative Deutsch has served in the legislature now, I think, for 8 years in the House. He did one term and then sat out a term, and now he's been back in for 3 terms, or 2 terms. But the Senate seat in District 4 opened up because Senator Wick termed out, and so Representative Deutsch was going to run for that. Steph Sauter, who is a relatively new, she's a first-term legislator, decided she also wanted that Senate seat. And so the only 2 incumbents in that district are now competing for the sole Senate seat, which is kind of an interesting race. Deutsch is well known, of course, for his stance on many of the social issues and his stance against legalizing marijuana. He's been kind of a champion of some of those things. Sauter, being relatively new as a legislator, has not really championed anything specifically. She's still kind of an unknown in that regard. I know she has a teaching background, I think, and may have also been or may still be a small town newspaper editor up in that country. So that's kind of the landscape, but it's just kind of interesting that those 2 are going after that single seat. And now there's 2 seats available then in the House, and there are 4 people, all newcomers, competing for those 2 seats. So,
what is motivating these candidates to maybe challenge each other? Is there voting records, or is there something, principles or platforms that maybe one candidate values better than the other that is bringing on the internal competition? And we can talk about that, especially maybe as we move into Senate District 8. Okay. With Casey Crabtree and Rick Weibel, and that's your home turf, Brookings, Madison area.
Let's talk a little bit about politics in South Dakota. The Republican Party dominates, and so it's a big tent. And as such, many of and I mentioned this I think before, the decisions about who will represent every district in South Dakota is often made during the primary. And so that's one factor of why we have a lot of primaries, is that's where the competition really occurs. And also within that big tent of the Republican Party, there is a wide range of philosophies. Sometimes we hear the words like conservative or ultra-conservative. Sometimes you hear words like describing people like moderate. These are sort of philosophies of the various people that are all underneath this big tent, this big Republican tent. So it's kind of natural that there are there are disagreements and there's sparring within that big tent of the Republican Party. So that's one factor why we have a lot of primaries. I think another one, and you sort of alluded to it, is maybe issue-oriented. And this past session, past 2 years actually, we've had a major issue in South Dakota over eminent domain reform, and it's all been circulating around what I consider to be dangerous carbon dioxide pipelines that are proposed to come into South Dakota. And I think that is motivating a number of these candidates to step forward and run. And for some of them that maybe it wasn't their primary motivator, it's certainly going to be a point of differentiation. Now in the Senate race in District 4 that you were talking about, Deutsch and Sauter, those 2 are on opposite sides of that issue. Deutsch came down on the side of the property owners and no eminent domain for private gain, if you've heard that mantra, whereas Sauter was on the opposite side of that. So I know that's a major issue within that campaign and a major distinction between them. Now, in the case of District 8 that I serve, I'm not certain where Rick Weibel will come down on that issue, but I think it's well known that Senator Crabtree championed and led the effort to pass Senate Bill 201, and I don't know if you've heard about that. It was sort of the very last bill, one of the very last bills to finally get across the finish line in the legislature by a very slim margin, very contentious bill that took away local control and really inserts state control over even the negotiations with landowners. So it's been given a name that I almost hate to say because it's not true. They called it the Landowner Bill of Rights when in fact, from my viewpoint, it does the opposite of that. So that's kind of at the heart of a number of these campaigns.
To speak to Rick Weibel, as he's a little closer to my district, I know he champions the election integrity and the property rights. So I could see that as fitting into your description as the internal swashbuckling, if you will.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's go down to State Senate 9, geographically down, District 9. That's a little more in my home turf in northeast Sioux Falls, Hartford area, west Sioux Falls, I should say. We've got Joy Hone. I recognize that name, and I've been hearing that she was like the first female commercial pilot. She's getting in new. And then Mark Willitson, he's been in the state legislature in that region off and on over the years. What do you know about that Senate 9 race there out of the Hartford, West Sioux Falls area?
I think you kind of teed it up well. Joy Hone, I think, is also one of these people who's been very engaged and active in this fight over eminent domain and against the CO2 pipelines. So whether that's her primary motivator or not, I don't know, but I'm sure that's a distinction. Now, Willitson's been out of the legislature during the time when we've been fighting that issue, so I don't know for sure where he lands on it. But knowing him from serving with him for a number of years, I would guess he's probably aligned on the opposite side of that. So they may be on opposite points on that particular issue.
After the break here, we'll talk more about some of the Senate primary and House primary races in South Dakota from the Facts. Welcome back to the Facts. I'm with State Representative John Mills from the Brookings area. We're talking about the Republican primary throughout the statewide races in the House and Senate. We're moving along to Senate District 16. Coming up for competition within the party there is Kevin Jensen and Eric Holman in Lincoln County. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I know a fair amount about Kevin. I think he and I got into the legislature at the same time, so I think he's 8 years in the legislature. He's been chairing the Health and Human Services Committee, I think, for the last 4 years at least. It's kind of an area of expertise for him. I think he has operated counseling services. And Kevin's been a champion for Second Amendment. He's brought a number of good bills that have made their way through in that regard. He's also, I think, a firearms instructor, NRA, highly rated, good guy. And he's trying to make a move over to the Senate. Now, his competition I don't know a lot about. New fellow. I understand he maybe is in the banking business or was or something, but I don't know what his motivation is, but that's the competition for the Senate seat in District 16.
And there's other races too we're going over. We're gonna finish one on the Senate side and move to the House. Senate 25, this is contentious the last couple of years, and this election cycle is northern Minnehaha County, Del Rapids, Coleman, and Moody County a little bit. District 25, Tom Pischke, the incumbent, versus Jordan Youngberg, who is coming back.
So Pischke has served, I think, 6 years, 4 in the House, and the last term, the last 2 years, he's been in the Senate, and he's being challenged by Youngberg, who has been in the legislature before. In fact, I think he served District 8 before, the district that I'm in now, in the Senate. And then I don't know why, but he resigned that position. And I think actually Crabtree was appointed to fill the remainder of his term when Youngberg resigned. That's going to be quite an interesting race because Pischke's a really tough campaigner. It's been fun to watch him grow as a legislator. When he first got in, he was kind of mainly a one-issue guy. very concerned about child custody, shared parenting, those issues. But he's really grown into a well-rounded legislator who's gotten to be quite articulate. I really enjoy Tom. Youngberg, his challenger, like I say, dropped out of the legislature, and then 2 years ago, I think he made a run for School and Public Lands Commissioner, but again, he dropped out. So he's got kind of some baggage, if you will, of not staying on course. So we'll see if he stays on course through the primary and how that shakes out.
Sure. I've been seeing a lot of signs up in northern Minnehaha County. It looks like they're both making a go on it. So that, as you said, will be an interesting race.
Yeah, Youngberg's a tough campaigner. I mean, he can be, yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's move on to some House races. And again, there's probably going to be some more we might not get to, but we'll continue with on another segment episode. How about House District 9? That is, again, Hartford, West Sioux Falls, western Minnehaha County. What do we know we got? Bethany Soy, the incumbent. Tessa Schwanz, a new person. Christy Golden, who's been in the politics a little bit, but she'd be a new member again. And Daryl Christensen, he served many years ago in a different district that I used to be in. What do you know about some of the names in those races?
You know, really the only one that I know is Bethany Soy. And you know, personally, I'm hoping that she will come back in. She's been quite a champion of some really important issues. You know, she took the lead this year on trying to require pornography sites on the internet to have age verification so that to protect our kids. Mm-hmm. And she really took the lead on that. That bill got out of the House strong. I think it only had 3 or 4 opposing votes. And then it died on the Senate, which happens more often than I wish with a number of these good bills. But Bethany's just been a champion of those kinds of really tough bills. The year before, I think she was the lead on the bill to make it illegal to do surgeries or drugs for kids who are confused about their sex.
Sure.
And so Bethany's just been a workhorse, a champion. She's a young mother. She's really quite a gal, and I'm personally hopeful that she will stay in. Obviously, there's 2 seats in the House, and so I hope Bethany gets one of them. The other 3 people that you mentioned, I know you know more about them than I do, Mike.
Yeah, well, some of the names, Christy Golden, we did reach out to her for some additional information. I know she's been active. We hadn't heard back from Christy. Daryl Christensen I can speak to about. He was in my district representative in the early 2000s, and so he has some experience. He is on the ballot in that district. So Tessa Schwanz is a new candidate. I've met her. She's helped out at some Republican events in Minnehaha County. So she's been interested and would like to step up. So some of these are new and some of them have been around before but still would be considered new. But Bethany Soy is the incumbent. And maybe this is a race where we could consider that there are some getting in that might have been out that are challenging Bethany.
Well, that could be, and maybe because she's taking a tough stand on some really tough issues.
Yes.
But those are, for those of us that are on the conservative side of the Republican Party, we're really thankful for people like Bethany. She, you know, and she comes with, she's a lawyer too, so she's very articulate. She's always well studied, always well prepared, always well reasoned. She's a young mother. I mean, she brings so many different qualities to the legislature that are of value, and we shouldn't all be old retired guys like me.
Age before beauty, that's all right. How about let's keep moving on with House District 12, a familiar name in the past who's coming back again, Manny Steele. This is District 12. Amber Arlant is the incumbent. Greg Jameson is the incumbent. This is West Sioux Falls, I believe, and south. It might go also into Lincoln County a bit.
You know, I don't know. I've served with Manny before also, and also with Greg Jameson. I don't know what's motivating Manny to come back in, but it might be that Arlen's, I think, served on Commerce Committee, and that's the committee that ended up killing a lot of bills related to eminent domain and the CO2 pipeline, a lot of bills that the conservatives would have liked to have seen pass. And so that might be part of what's motivating Manny. I don't know.
I could agree with that, and knowing Manny and being from the Sioux Falls region and in previous office and repeatedly winning in years past.
And Jameson, of course, a former Sioux Falls City Councilor. Yeah. He's always a very interesting legislator, very thoughtful, always seems to weigh the positions carefully. He's probably somebody who sits almost right in the middle of the Republican Party, and sometimes one side and sometimes the other. So a very interesting fellow.
Let's wrap up with House District 16. This is in Canton and Lincoln County and southward and western Lincoln County, I believe. We have Carla Lems, Richard Vasgard, and Brian Burge. Yep. Sorry if I'm butchering that name. I just don't recognize the name, but I do recognize the first two, incumbent Carla Lems.
Carla's, I think, just a one-term legislator so far, but oh my, did she sort of distinguish herself, particularly as it relates to the eminent domain and the fight against the CO2 pipelines. She's been at the forefront of that from the very beginning and is very well spoken. She's just a powerhouse of a diminutive little gal, and so I hope Carla gets to stay in. I do know the other two candidates as well. Richard Vasgard has served one term with Richard, and then I think in this last go-around he didn't make it. A little bit to the left of center, a nice guy. Don't know where he is on some of these issues we've been talking about. Brian Burge is a really interesting fellow. He's a arborist from down in that country, and he, for the last few years, because his business is kind of dormant during the wintertime, he ends up spending a fair amount of time in Pierre and is always engaging and trying to solve problems. So he's a very interesting fellow.
That's okay. I did remember meeting him at a Turner County Lincoln.
Yeah, he's come up to me many times, willing to help and
okay. So Carla Lems is a newbie, but she was a stalwart for property rights.
Oh, yeah.
And things in the party on the platform. She was good.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope that, and she's vying for another round.
Great.
Thank you for being here on the Facts today.
Hey, you're welcome, Mike. It's good to be here.
Check us out next time on the Facts.